All right, I'm going to get started and we'll just let everyone else filter in. Good morning. I am Clara Lekshak, Executive Director of Sustain Dane. Welcome to the July Sustainable Breakfast Series. We're really happy to have everyone here today. You'll be able to see my screen. We have an amazing panel here and a really fantastic discussion. Looking forward to it. We'll start by welcoming our new members who have joined us since our April SBS meeting. Fleetworthy Solutions, KL Engineering, Linda and Green Farley Center for Peace, Justice, and Sustainability, Green Life Trading Company, Curbside Bicycles, and Madison 365. We also have 7 additional new members who have joined us. Welcome. I would like to recognize and thank all of our program partners and supporting tree, forest, and leaf level members. Membership is a great way to join Sustain Dane Network, support our work, and this is a place where everyone is welcome. Really, the benefits have many different aspects, including complimentary attendance to programs like this one that you guys are all participating in. We have some upcoming programs starting with our summer social at the Obrick Beer Garden at the end of, that should say July, not June. So that's coming up later this week. We have lunchtime networking at the first part of September, and then our October Sustainable Breakfast Series coming up. We also last week announced the summit, the Sustain Dane Summit, which will be on Thursday, November 18th. The theme is Weaving Stories for Change, and we're very excited to announce that our keynote speaker will be Kimberly Nicholas, who's the author of Under the Sky We Make, How to Be Human in a Warming World. We'll also, like last year, have a local leaders panel. We're going to recognize our business, organization, and individuals who have completed sustainability projects with our programs and recognize the Live Forward awardees. I'm going to stop sharing here and onto our program. So if we're going to meet our local and our global community climate goals, we need to be taking action on carbon. And today our panel is going to share with you their stories of planning and achieving their carbon goals through carbon neutral operations and net zero buildings. It's also important that the work of utilities is focused on this. For example, MG&E's Net Zero 50 plan and some of the movement that's happened with Shared Solar, which has about 2,000 residential and business customers, and Green Power Tomorrow with 10,000 customers with renewable wind power. There's also the solar fields. So the O'Brien Solar Field, which is Dane County's largest solar field array, delivering the local generated sustainable energy to MG&E's grid. And there's the renewable energy rider that several of our Sustain Dane members have participated in, like Fitchburg and Promega and Tribe 9, UW, and Willie Street Co-op. There's also in development right now the Hemmersdorf Solar Field, and that's part of going to be serving the city of Madison and the school district, plus EV fast charging stations that are coming to East Washington. So I mentioned these as kind of some of the ideas you might have heard about or stories you might have heard about, and we're going to be thinking about how those are part of connecting back to our carbon goals. Sustain Dane is a partner to help you prioritize and implement sustainability solutions, so please do reach out if you'd like to schedule a one-on-one. And after the presentation, we will send out an email with many of the resources that we're going to talk about today. So I hope that you are inspired by the case studies today and consider what carbon innovations you can apply at your own organizations. With that, please welcome our moderator, Christie Baumel, Deputy Mayor for the City of Madison.
Hi there. Thank you, Claire. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'll kick us off a little in terms of what we want to get out of this and orient folks, but I want to first give everybody a chance to talk a little bit about just basic introductions, who you are, why you're on this panel, what has your business or organization done or accomplished that we want to explore and dig into today. So I will start. I'm generally the moderator, but I'm also here because of the City of Madison's goals and because we need partnerships with our entire community to achieve those goals. So I'm a deputy mayor for the City of Madison. I'm a liaison to about a quarter of the city's operations, but within that is sustainability. And the city has goals for 100% renewable energy by 2030, and has a strong plan for how to achieve that on its own kind of corporate footprint and municipal facility and fleets. We also have a goal to be net carbon neutral by 2050 community-wide. We have a number of programs that support that and help with that, but it's certainly nothing that we could do alone. We need partners in the community. So that's a quick overview of our goals, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, but I'd like to also ask Francisco, Andrew, and Scott, if you could talk a little about who you are, what your business organization is, and what you've done that's made us so excited to, or what you're doing that's made us so excited to hear from you today. Let's start with Andrew, since you're on the top of my screen.
You bet. My name's Andy Weiland. I serve as the business manager for Oregon School District, and we were fortunate enough to, even in a pandemic, open the first net zero public school or school in state of Wisconsin this last September. It's about 127,000 square foot, so it's a decent sized building, and it basically marries geothermal and solar together, about 1,700 solar panels and about 99 400-foot wells. So that we don't create over the course of the entire year any carbon, additional carbon into the atmosphere. So we are in the kind of the phase of, we don't have a year underneath our belt yet. We're about a month away from that point, but everything's tracking real well, and we fully expect to be net zero at the end of August.
All right, great. So going counterclockwise here, Francisco, can you introduce yourself?
Oh, thank you, Christy, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. My name is Francisco Saju. I am the president of Sustainable Community Partners, which is an organization that helps individuals and organizations meet their sustainability goals. I have a background in engineering. I'm a former program manager for the focus on energy new construction. So I'm familiar with the Oregon School, the Net Zero project, which was one of the projects that I had in the program when I was the manager. So it's a great project, one that I always love to talk about. I am also someone who is very interested in issues of equity and access. So I split my time between Sustainable Community Partners and a nonprofit that I manage is called Equity, where we are trying to create more opportunities for people of color to engage in cycling and all the benefits that offers to people. So I also bring that lens into the sustainable community practice. Some of the things that I learned during my work at Focus on Energy is that we have some great programs and opportunities to support individuals and organizations with energy efficiency and renewable energy and things like that. But I also saw that there are some gaps in these programs, and some of my goal has been to try to fill some of those gaps and provide services to bring those who are not participating into this market, because there are great opportunities, and I think everybody should be able to access those services and opportunities.
Thank you. And Scott.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on the panel. My name is Scott Anderson. I'm one of the co-owners at Artisan Dental, and we were invited to the panel today to share more about our experience as a small business becoming carbon neutral. Our journey started back in 2015, a year after opening the practice, where we decided to purchase 100% of our electricity from MG&E's Green Power program. In the following year, we made the decision to offset our scope 1 and 2 greenhouse gases with carbon offsets. And then last year, we committed to becoming carbon neutral through additional purchases of carbon offsets for our scope 3 greenhouse gases, and thereby became the first carbon neutral general dentistry practice. And we're kind of a unique situation in that we're in a multi-use commercial building on East Washington. So we're somewhat constrained in terms of the types of energies that we're using from the larger building, but through partnerships with MG&E, and others, we were able to obtain carbon neutrality.
All right, thanks so much. I appreciate that. So by way of opening this panel, we'd like to spend about a half hour peppering the three of you with questions so we can learn more about what you did, why you did it, how you did it, what you're learning. We're really looking for the inspiration factor and helping others on this call see that there are some really strong achievable steps. We're hoping that they leave thinking about what they can do within their own organization and an understanding of how to go about doing that. Just by way of stage setting from my role at the city, I mentioned in my introduction, we have renewable energy goals, we have carbon goals, we have an imperative to take action in the near term. So I'm going to go all doom and gloom for a moment, but I promise not to stay there. We know we have a scientific imperative to almost halve our emissions globally by 2030 in order to avoid just catastrophic impacts of climate change. But I think what's really important there is that's 8.5 years away. It's easy to forget that and think about it as a future thing, but we see the snowball effect of all of this, and we know that our time is short to really dramatically change the course we're on. So that's why we're acting, and we care about the health of our community, we care about the public good, and we recognize the ripple effects and multiple impacts of climate change, and we recognize that we're stronger and more resilient as a community if we're taking these actions. So that's why the city cares. When it comes to our own facilities, like I said, we purchased renewable energy from MG&E. We built it on our own rooftops. We started a green power program to be teaching people to put it on rooftops. We are transitioning our fleet to electric vehicles and biodiesel vehicles, and I'm sure other things that I'm forgetting to mention right now. But we also want to help the community. We've got a Madison grant program where we can help the private sector get solar panels on their roofs. We're working with Sustain Dane and Elevate to help accelerate energy retrofits in apartment buildings. We're building a bus rapid transit system to make transit really, really, fast and frequent, to make it the easiest way to get around, and a lot more. But the truth is we cannot do this on our own. We really need everybody in the community to be working together towards these goals if we're really going to see aggressive change like that. So having our emissions by 2030. Buildings are almost half of our emissions in Madison. 48% of our emissions are from buildings. Transportation is 41% of our emissions. So these are very aggressive goals, and so it can't just be government saying this is our goal, we'll establish a few programs and poof, it'll all magically come together. If it was that easy, we wouldn't be having these dire gloom and doom moments. So we really are anxious and excited about and welcoming all of the action that we're seeing in Madison and Dane County and around the country. And we really want to accelerate that and be part of this forum to share those stories and help others see that they can be doing something too and how to get started. So that's my intro of what we're hoping folks will take away. And I have a set of questions that I'll try to rotate between the three of you and asking. I'd love for this to feel conversational. So if I ask a question of one of you and the other wishes I would have asked it of you because you've got a great answer, chime in or ask a follow-up question. We'll do our best to make this as engaging as possible. So with that, I'll ask questions for about a half hour and then we'll turn to the audience and take questions from them. So to get us started, I'm going to start with the basics and turning to Francisco. So tell us a little bit more, just to make sure everybody on the call is clear. What does it mean to be net zero, or particularly in a building? What does net zero mean? And how does that differ from having carbon neutral operations?
Right. Those are good questions. And I think, yeah, just let's get the definitions out of the way. So a net zero building is a building that uh, produces as much renewable energy as it uses on an annual basis. So basically, if you look at the annual operations of the building, at some points the building will be using electricity from the grid, and at some point the building will be exporting electricity to the grid, so that at the end of the year, that it's a net zero consumption. And that's different than carbon neutral operations, because carbon neutral operations go beyond that building. So that includes all the emissions that are related to the operations of that organization. So that includes your building, of course, but that also includes vehicles. So if the building has vehicles, the emissions coming from those vehicles, that also includes things like business travel, and even things like the emissions associated with disposal of products at the end of their useful life. So that is a more comprehensive approach to carbon neutrality. Buildings, I think, are a great way to start. We're a lot familiar with energy and how you track and manage your energy. Carbon emissions from operations are a little bit more complicated. They can be done, and it can be tracked, and they can be managed for sure. And there are examples of that, many success stories, but they are more comprehensive. So buildings are definitely a good way to start.
Great, I appreciate that. Thank you. And I'm going to use that definition to talk to take that to Scott and Artisan Dental. Scott, you mentioned starting with your MG&E, choosing green power through your MG&E bill, and then moving on to fully scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions. Can you say a little bit more about what's within those scopes and what is fully offset, and a little bit more of how you did that? Like, who did you work with? How long did it take? What was your experience like in getting to that point?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. So today, just to kind of give people a sense of what our electric usage is and how it's being offset, our use of 100% renewable energy accounts for about 83% of our carbon footprint. So one very easy way that an organization can significantly reduce their carbon footprint is to transition to 100% renewables. And as Andy's example points out, you might be producing that on site, or you might be partnering with someone like MG&E for that. So the balance of that carbon footprint really came from those different types of carbon creation that Francisco outlined. And because we as an organization didn't have the expertise of being able to really specifically outline how to calculate those different greenhouse gases, we partnered with an organization in New York called Carbon Credit Capital. And what they have is they have very sophisticated software that looks at even down to the product level that we're using. Maybe in dentistry, it's a cotton ball or an adhesive. And they can take our total volume of product usage. They can take things like employee commutes. They can take the shipping associated with products coming to our office. And then they can estimate that using these software programs that they have. And they effectively gave us a number. In our case, it was 12 additional metric tons of carbon that we needed to offset. And then Carbon Credit Capital also served as a broker for us to go into the carbon offset marketplace and select an offset project. In our case, we selected a reforestation project in the Mississippi Valley, the southern part of the United States, which we really liked from the standpoint of the fact that it also is creating a variety of different benefits in terms of, promoting biodiversity, filtering water systems, and then creating habitat for insects and mammals. So that's a process that we undertook last year. And the piece that I want to kind of share with other small businesses listening is that process from our experience was very easy. It was very straightforward. They essentially sent us a series of spreadsheets. We populated those spreadsheets with the various products we use, the amounts of natural gas that we use in our larger facility, sent that back to them, and then they came back to us with this 12 metric tons that we needed to offset, and then a choice of offset projects.
Great, that's fantastic. Thank you. And Andy, how about you? How did the Oregon School District decide to pursue this? What first made you interested in the net zero building concept, and how did you decide to pursue it? Who was engaged in that process with you?
Sure. So we had lots of partners with HGA helping us kind of design the net zero goal and model the building. Findorf was our construction manager, and then Bray Architects designed the facility for us. But how we started is actually we've been doing this for quite some time now. Our community is very progressive in that nature. We've done probably one of the first projects I was involved in was back in early 2000s. We identified a way to save 1 million gallons of water a year by identifying places where we were using the city water, the village water, to basically cool our freezers and coolers at the high school. And by just simply moving to an air-cooled system on the roof, over $1 million, actually close to 1.2 million gallons a year were saved through the sewer system and the public water system. So doing those types of things for some time. We also became very involved in solar in 2014 referendum, where we added solar to 3 of our buildings. That was just kind of part of where we were moving. The next referendum was in 2018, and our board had actually just approved a policy. And the policy was twofold. It talked about both operational sustainability and then educational sustainability.
Andy, we lost you for a moment. You're muted now.
There's a little bit of a storm in South Carolina where I'm at right now, so I apologize for that. So hopefully we'll be able to get through this. As I was saying, the Board of Education approved a policy in 2018. They'd been talking a lot about sustainability, and they had a 2-pronged policy talking about both the operational sustainability as well as instructional sustainability, because our community felt strongly that not only should we show our community how we can be sustainable with our operations, but also we want to teach the next generation so that they can forward our goals and use the tools that we have even in our buildings to basically be an example for our students. So we started working on that in 2018, and one of the questions that we had was, what's that big goal? What can we reach to a little bit? Our Board of Education has always been willing to take some degree of chance, measured, but some degree of chance, and learn from our mistakes and continue to move forward. And we said, well, what's something that's grand, that's kind of overreaching and hasn't been done in Wisconsin? And how do we measure that, right? Because a lot of people had been doing LEED buildings and those types of things, which are great projects. But what was simple about net zero is it was simple math. You could simply take the utility bills and figure out how much energy you produced to the grid, how much energy you made or used from the grid. And at the end of 12 months, you know whether you were on track or not, or you accomplished your goal. There is a part of that, though. You need to make sure you're on track all along. And so one of the things that's been really interesting here is using the model that HGA developed, and on a monthly basis, kind of gauging how we've been doing and seeing if there's something that's out of whack a little bit. And that's been really interesting. We have a perfect example of that just in the last month. As we hit summer, our buildings aren't used as much, and our energy usage was higher than we thought it should be. And so diving into the systems that we built into this building, is a very smart building. We identified that we were running our hot water system, and because it's a fairly long building, we were basically running our hot water heaters constantly. Simply putting a timer on that so that we only have that hot water running during the day saved about 3 megawatts of energy a month. And we'd be able to make some just tweaks to that. So constantly monitoring those types of things is really important. Personally, interesting fact about me is I love tinkering with these types of things. I grew up with a tinkerer as a father, and a sustainable father as well. Back in the 80s, when there was solar initiatives out there, he put solar on our house, and it turned out at that time in my life, my younger brother and I weren't getting along really well in our bedroom together. So I was downstairs, and that's where the solar controls were, as well as a wood-fired boiler. And so we were kind of off grid a little bit with heating our house at that point in time. And I was the one that was responsible for keeping the boiler going. And because all the solar controls were right there, I was real engaged in trying to learn how it all worked together. So love that tinkering mentality, hope to instill that in our students at Oregon School District so that we can continue to move forward with this important goal.
Great, thank you, Andy. And I just want to recognize Kathy Kuntz's comment in the chat. We have the first carbon neutral dentistry in the nation and the first carbon neutral school in Wisconsin. So we are a group of firsts here. So well done and congratulations on that. I want to dig into some of those questions a little bit in terms, like, what does that mean? I'm going a little out of order of my script here. So my little theme, I'm going to jump from my little organization I had of themes, will move around a little, but I want to pick up on that. And what has that benefited you? How did you, what's the reception you get for those achievements? Is this something that Andy, whether it's kids who go to school there or the rest of the community, or Scott, whether your customers, or why people say they are choosing to go there, or the people that work there, how are folks feeling about this? Are you seeing that that's something that people appreciate and value about your organizations?
Andy, do you want to take that first?
If you wouldn't mind, I lost a little bit of that question, so I'll try to pick it up.
Sure. Yeah. So I think it's a great question that you're asking, Christie, because what we're finding in our own experience is that our team members really appreciate that, as do our customers. And we've even found that this is reflected in, for example, online patient reviews. And so I think initiatives like this are ways that organizations can actually attract and retain new customers if they're for-profit entities. And it's a way for organizations to express their values. And then customers and team members can then align with that. And then I would also point to the fact that the larger business for good movement that's kind of underway globally really points to the idea, and there's now good research done by credible sources such as the consultancy Accenture, Hewlett-Packard, etc., pointing to the fact that even globally, customers, employees are looking to work with and collaborate with organizations that are creating positive environmental and social impact. And so I think this is another way that companies can align themselves with this larger trend that's emerging in the global culture.
And I also wanted to comment on this question because even though the question wasn't for me, but I as I was working with Focus on Energy, managing that program, the new construction program, I had the opportunity to work with several schools in Wisconsin, several school districts. And one of the things that I learned, one of the things I noticed is that the schools really they take their commitment to educate the next generation into their buildings. Like it goes beyond the curriculum. They use their buildings as a teaching tool. And that's something that we love to see. And some of the schools here have some amazing projects, even in a system that sometimes makes it a little bit difficult for them to be innovative. but we still see some amazing projects, and I saw some great examples of good design, very thoughtful design, when I was working for Focus on Energy, seeing the projects that were coming to our program. So I guess the one thing I would say is to everyone in the audience is, if you have the opportunity, or if you are somebody that has some influence and can support the school districts as they go through their design process and trying to be in the forefront of design, please be supportive, because we need more of that.
I'll jump in there just a brief moment as well. That is huge, making sure that we have kind of some initiative here. One of the things that we've been fortunate in Oregon is the Village of Oregon is about to build a library. And because we built the first net zero school, the village board was able to increase the budget so that that building could be more sustainable as it's being designed. Not sure if they'll get to net zero, but they're hoping to get close. I've also heard from our construction partners out there at McFarland is building the first net zero public service building. So I think the hope is that we can show the community and the larger community what can be done, and we can continue to influence that so that we can speed up the process a little bit. Like was mentioned before, 2030 is not that far away. We started our design process in 2017, and it took us 3 years from start to finish to have that building done. So the faster we can go, the better in this area.
Yeah, agreed. And Francisco, thank you for adding what you've heard from other schools. And I'm curious if other types of clients, what are you hearing in terms of what their interests are, what types of steps you see being taken, and what's important to consider? What are the major questions that your clients are asking you? What helps them make a decision to push toward net zero energy or carbon neutrality?
Yeah, so I think that the biggest issue here, the biggest thing that we're trying to achieve here is education. I was reading an article from the New Building Institute recently that said that net zero buildings there has been an increase of 700% since 2012. And I think it just speaks to the fact that when somebody takes the lead, others follow. And that's one of the reasons I am so appreciative of the work that the school district, the Oregon School District, has done. Because we need to, and also Scott with his organization, we need to lead by example, right? So when people see others doing something that's beneficial, there might be an inclination to follow. I think that there has been a lot of people don't understand that building a net zero building is not that complicated, really. It's an issue of understanding. Like Andy said earlier, it's an issue of simple math. You need to understand how your building operates, and you need to understand how to produce enough electricity to offset that. And one of the things that we don't do enough is invest enough time in considering how our buildings are going to operate early in design. And that is something that we need to do more education, helping people understand that you have the ability to understand how your building will operate while you're designing your building. So it's not like guessing how much energy their building is going to use, because you can guess, but you can model it and you can get pretty close to understanding how the building will operate, and that you have a lot of power to decide, to influence that, right? So by just doing smart design, you can cut your energy cost by 50% if you spend enough time and if you work with the right team to help you get there. So it's a matter of setting goals. It's a matter of understanding where you want to be and putting the time and the effort and having the right team to help you get there. So what are the benefits that people get? I recently found another well, actually, there's an organization I worked with in the past, a healthcare organization in Wisconsin, which I cannot mention names because of confidentiality issues, but they recently published that they are saving about $3 million a year in energy cost because they have adopted some very aggressive sustainability goals over the past few years, and they are working to get there. And $3 million a year is not a small number. You know, it might be a small percentage of your budget, but if you look at that, $3 million is a lot of money. So, and beyond that, they're also seeing benefits in terms of the air quality, local air quality, and being a healthcare organization. That's something that's very important to them. So, I mean, there are many benefits, and I think a lot of people are hesitant to be first because there are risks associated with that. But I also think that there are a lot of risks associated with doing nothing because, you know, unfortunately, we need to take better care of the planet. We need to be mindful of the fact that our operations, you know, whatever you do has an impact in the environment, has an impact in society, has an impact on the planet. And if you don't manage that, you're running the risk of having to adjust to regulation that will come no matter what, and having to do that in a hurry. So I think that if you have the opportunity to start thinking about these things early, if you have the opportunity to start looking at your operations, looking at your building and trying to mitigate those issues early on, you're building resilience for your organization, and you're helping society, you're helping us all, you know, live a better life.
Agreed. Thank you, Francisco. And I want to pick up about what you said about the design process and the early design focus. And Andy, ask you, how is the design process? And do you find that the design professionals and construction folks are oriented to this? Has that been something that worked smoothly?
It did after we originally set the goal. I mean, you have to set the goal right from the get-go. I think somebody in the chat said it can't be an afterthought. Once the basic design of the building's done and you try to add goals to it, that becomes very, very difficult. And I wanted to just stress something that Francisco was kind of saying is, you know, buildings last a long time, at least in school world. Our schools, you know, last 50, 60 years easily. So you put that in the context of what we're talking about here. And I honestly, I don't know how we can not build net zero buildings with schools because it's way too late by the time we're going to build the next building in that spot. So we need to be doing these things right now as much as possible. But to go back to your question, yeah, you just need to be very firm with everybody, get your engineers there right from the get-go. And yeah, there was a little bit of stress. There was a little bit of negotiation that happened at times. We felt very strongly that we wanted only an electric building. So we do have no natural gas that actually goes to the building. That makes the calculations for this equation very easily. Like I said before, you don't have to convert anything from natural gas energy to electrical energy. It's all electrical. So that was a very important component to us when we were designing the building. And once everybody was on board with that, we figured out technologies to make everything work. The other thing that I'll stress with this building is, and with all these buildings is, you walked up to Forest Edge Elementary in Fitchburg right now, you don't know that it's net zero. It works. It just works. If you got up on the second floor, you see all the solar panels. But as you're walking or approaching the building or walking through the building until you get to that second floor, you wouldn't even know. It's not like people are giving up things politically. That's kind of been something that's been said is, you know, if you do a net zero building, you're not going to have any windows. We have tons of windows in Forest Edge Elementary because there's science that shows that kids perform better with natural light. And so very, very important component to this. Lots of windows, lots of natural lights. We gave nothing away when we built this building. It's a high performing building that's awesome.
I so appreciate hearing you say that. I'm glad you highlighted that. Thank you. I want to look a little towards the future now. Scott, you mentioned the business for good movement underway. And Andy, you mentioned an all-electric building, which I would say these are both mentions of trends to me. I'm not sure all electric is we're not quite in the middle of that trend, but I think that's the trend that we see coming in terms of what's next. We have a pathway we can see for carbon neutral electricity, but what about all of those fossil fuels we use for heating our building? We've got to find a renewable source for those, and it might be a heating and cooling via our renewable electricity. So all electric buildings are one trend. This business for good movement, another trend. I'd like to ask all three of you, what other trends are you seeing? Where do you think companies are heading in terms of carbon goals and how to achieve them? What other industry or organization trends do you see that you think have relevance to this topic?
One of the trends that I learned about in speaking with our colleagues at Green Trees, which is the company that we purchased carbon offsets from, is they're seeing preliminary indications that product labeling may include a metric on the label that indicates how much carbon is associated with that product. So therefore, if companies can produce carbon neutral products and services, that could be something that they could market on the product labeling that would serve, my sense would be as a competitive advantage that would attract those customers that, the research is showing are out there and are looking for companies to really integrate these benefits into their product and service. So I think that's very salient. So I could see a day where, in addition to, let's imagine in the case of foods, the nutritional information, you'll see the carbon information as well.
In terms of trends of what we need to do, I see like the really big things are two buckets, the building buckets and the transportation bucket. And for those two, the solution to me is beneficial electrification, which is a term that we are throwing around a lot these days, and sometimes it's confusing. But I think that the opportunities, we sometimes underestimate the opportunities that we have by electrifying things. And it's not going to be easy, but it's also not as complicated as we believe. And so in the buildings industry, one thing I would like to mention, or maybe, shout out to, all electric buildings that are doing ground source heat pumps, for example, which is a technology that we don't embrace enough in Wisconsin, and it has a lot of potential, And if you look at the projects that have been done with ground source heat pumps here, you have organizations that are doing it not because they're interested in sustainability per se. They're doing it because it's just good business. So I think that is a technology that we are not using, and we have an opportunity to embrace and to promote and to make well known that it's a technology that makes sense for Wisconsin. And we have some really good school projects in Wisconsin actually using that technology. So I encourage people to get to know those projects because that is a really good way to get energy efficiency here in Wisconsin. In terms of the transportation sector, we really need to continue moving towards electrification. And in order to do that, we really have to support deployment of charging stations because one of the issues here continues to be access to charging stations. And we also have municipalities and government entities need to actually embrace it and act in a way that's consistent. So, kind of a short anecdote is, my wife and I, we own an electric vehicle. And like last week, my wife took it to Door County for a meeting she had. And, we planned the trip. She knew she was going to get there, with enough charge, but she will need to charge on the way back. And she stops to charge at one of the charging stations. And during that time, there was a farmers market that's organized by the municipality. And guess where the farmers market stalls were located? In front of the charging station. So, she couldn't charge, and the whole thing became a nightmare after that because, it was like, okay, let's go here and get a little bit charge here, and then so we can make it all the way to Beaver Dam where you can find a DC fast charging station. So the issues, things can be done, but we just all need to kind of be consistent on, we're trying to do this, and we're gonna do that. We're gonna take actions to support that. And honestly, if you ask me why do you think having an electric vehicle was a good idea, I could tell you, well, it's because the emissions, we have a little bit more control of the emissions coming out of that vehicle, but also it's because of the money, because we calculated if you were to do that trip on our EV, it will be $9 with the fuel. If you were to do each way, if you were to do the same trip with a Prius, for example, it'd be $20 to $22 with the fuel. So it's 50%, it's like it will cost half to do it with electric. So it makes sense from the economic standpoint, it makes sense from the mission standpoint, but we still have a lot of work to do, making sure that the infrastructure and that the support is there to allow people to do things correctly.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And I know we're a little beyond time, and I want to get to questions in the Q&A, but so I'm going to ask just one person, and maybe Francisco, I'll ask you this. I just would be remiss to not leave folks listening in with this answer is, so if an organization wants to do something, how do they get started? How can they take their first steps to figuring out what they can learn, who they should call, setting a big goal? What's your advice for how they step and move forward there?
Right, so organizations looking to do something about this. I mean, the first thing you have to do is you have to try to understand the impact of your operations. You have to understand the impact of your buildings, and there are a lot of organizations out there that can help you understand that. If you're building a new building, make sure that you have a design team that can do energy modeling for your building. That's something we don't do enough. And in a way, it's like, I imagine, like if you're buying a new vehicle and you go to the dealership and you ask, the salesperson, like, how many miles per gallon do I get in this vehicle? And they tell you, well, we actually don't know. You have to drive it and figure it out. That's a red flag for me, right? But that's the way how we approach buildings. It's like, we don't ask how much it's going to cost me to operate this building. And the thing is, we do have the technology, we have the tools. It's not that complicated to figure those things out and to manipulate those things to get you to where you want to be. We have financial tools to help you pay for that. So, Wisconsin had the Focus on Energy program that can help you with incentives, can help you with technical assistance. There is PACE financing that can help people pay for the investments in energy efficiency and renewable energy. So there are tools here that you can use. You need to have somebody in your design team that's going to advocate for you and help maintain those, to center those goals, because for design professionals, being in the forefront, being the leading edge comes with some risk, and that's a risk that they might try to avoid if they don't have to assume. So you have to have somebody in that team that can advocate for you and can keep those things front and center. It's like, we know that sustainability is a core value, and how do we maintain that at the forefront of what we're doing? So I would say that is, manage, understand your impact, set up some goals, and how you're going to manage, and get the right people on your team to make sure that you accomplish those goals.
Great, thank you so much. And thanks so much to all of you. I am pulling up the questions now to take some Q&A from the audience. There's been quite a lively chat, so I appreciate the help some people have put these live into the into the Q&A. And I think skimming quickly, but I noticed some are related to making the invisible visible. So if a visitor would never know that you had a carbon neutral school, or would somebody know that Artisan is a carbon neutral dentistry? How do we, either in your examples or to all three of you, what are other ways that we can make sure that we're highlighting what we're doing, highlighting the successes, making sure people are aware of the impact of this? And somewhere in that chat, somebody would love to even bring those successes to the energy code conversation, I see. So that is a whole other important ball of wax right now. But any quick responses to that?
Not to dominate the conversation, but one thing I can offer to that is I would love to see a day where we're doing benchmarking of buildings, because that is a good way to kind of show where everybody's at, not to shame the buildings that are not performing well, but to find opportunities to help those projects find opportunities to do energy savings and be more sustainable. One of the hard things about doing energy efficiency is that energy efficiency is hard to show. So one of the things when in the sustainability movement in buildings, we see a lot of solar panels because they're great and they're easy to show. It is really hard to show the benefits of your heat recovery wheel. People don't understand that. So we tend to sometimes bypass that because it's not really easy to showcase. I say don't. You really need to focus on energy efficiency before you start thinking about renewables. Back to the definition of net zero buildings. Net zero buildings usually use 50 to 70% less electricity than the code requires. So you have to do really deep energy efficiency before you start throwing renewable generation on those buildings. It's hard to show, but it would be great if we could have some system of benchmarking system where you can actually reference your building relative to others. Now, if you do net zero, you actually show the benefits of your energy efficiency and your renewable energy combined, and you can say, no, our building is great. We don't use any energy at the end of the year.
The other thing I would add is we are actually working on that component of it right now, in that we are having a dashboard. There will be a TV, probably real close to the school year. As you walk into the building, you'll know how the building performed from the get-go. So that's important to us, as well as just transparency. Same dashboard will be available on the internet. So if anybody wants to look at it, they can. And I always start with any of our buildings. I try to start with measuring just the energy. If people are just looking at
The storm is surging, I think. Oh, are you back?
Sorry. Yeah, I was just going to say, if people just keep looking at their energy bill, a couple days after the end of the month, that's really hard to get ahead of it. So we have these little devices. They're fairly inexpensive. They're called eGauge. You can look them up. There's lots of them. It's just basically a sub-metering device, but you install that on your building and you can see the profile of the building and how it's performing at any given point in time. It's real time. And it saved us several times when things have been left on and that type of thing. Start there and get a feel for how your building performs. And then you can measure at that point in time. You'll be able to measure any changes that you make.
Thank you. I'm going to make, it's been elevated in the chat several times, so I will make a quick comment on the energy code. So we have this every 3 years, there is a new energy code adopted, like a model code at the national level, and states then have the opportunity to adopt it locally. The last one we adopted was in 2015, even though there was a 2018 version. Now there's a 2021 version. We stripped some things out of the 2015 code, which means our commercial energy code is probably more akin to the 2009 code. Right now, the state is considering adopting that 2021 model, which would make our buildings way more efficient. There's been huge gains in that span of time. And as you see Molly saying, there are already some amendments proposed that would strip some things out. So voices to show this works. We're doing this. It's not hard. We're not asking the impossible. This works. We want this. It's cost effective would be good. So email Molly at HGA. I'm putting you on the spot, Molly. Email me, email Claire at Sustained Day, and I'm putting you on the spot, Claire, but we can between the three of us find a way to connect folks there. It's an important issue. There's another question in here. I'm switching gears a little, but I would be interested to know if anybody has any, Molly's putting her email in there. Has experience or is starting to look at embodied carbon. Scott, is that part of the scope of your emissions? Or I know it's a building that was constructed by somebody else, but between the three of you, how have you had conversations or experience thinking about embodied carbon within your construction process and then the materials that you purchase and build with?
Francisco and Andy, I would defer to you. I can say that in our Scopes 3 profile, they do account for the carbon associated with disposal of the very few products that we sell, like an electric toothbrush, etc. But I'll defer to Francisco and Andy.
So none of the analysis I've done so far includes embodied carbon. I think that that's part of a set of emissions that have been kept separate from most of the emissions that we look, definitely the ones that we look at for organizations' operation. I think it's a very interesting thing to look into. One that, yeah, we tend to overlook. I don't have a lot of experience working with embodied carbon, actually, outside of, if you're looking at a new facility and you're trying to decide whether it's better to build a new building or to renovate the one you have, then it becomes an interesting conversation. But beyond that, I haven't seen a great application for it.
Thank you. It is, I know it's a growing body of work nationally. Architecture 2030, which I think they are just architecture2030.org. They are doing quite a bit of work on it. They now have a 2030 challenge for embodied carbon. Yes, it is architecture2030.org. So there's a lot of information nationally that I think we could pull and make applicable, and I'm happy to make some connections if folks are interested in that. I see a question from me in the chat. We've got a few minutes left here. So I'll make this a last question, which perhaps would generate a whole lot more questions. So sorry about that. But Russell asked if I could speak to where the city is in considering things like benchmarking or transparency or mandates. And yes, we are considering this. We've had a number of people reach out to us saying it's time for the city to take the next step. If we're serious about climate action, we need to be taking the steps that other cities are taking. And there are fully dozens who have taken steps related to, regular action related to energy efficiency on existing buildings. And that takes a number of forms. Some it's monitoring and accounting for that every year through benchmarking, like Francisco said. Others go further and say every so often you need to just make sure your building's running the way it's supposed to. Or others say you have to even hit a certain standard. No terrible performers allowed in the city. So we are looking into that right now. And some of you, we've started reaching out and having conversations with people who own and run buildings, who manage portfolios, who consult on energy efficiency for a living, and all kinds of folks to learn more and get good ideas. And so please do reach out to me if you want to be part of that early conversation. It is definitely nothing we have settled yet in terms of a specific solution, but it is definitely something we're investigating. So future conversation on that. And with that, thank you all so much. I want to turn it back to Claire for final words, but I really appreciate our panelists. I appreciate Claire being patient with me, probably going a minute or two too late here. And yeah, very much appreciative for all the actions you've taken and for sharing them with us today. So Scott, Andy, Francisco, thank you so much.
I'll just echo the thank you to everyone for being here. If your question did not get answered, always feel free to reach out to Sustain Dane and we can connect you either with the answer or get you to the right person to get you that answer. So this has been great. Tell someone else today about this conversation and let's all get focused. Okay. Bye.